Salve a tutti, sono Almarok e benvenuti in un nuovo video. Oggi siamo qui per fare un'intervista a Mantas, noto per essere il leader del progetto omonimo e per essere stato chitarrista dei Venom e dei Venom.Inc. Prima di iniziare lo ringrazio per la sua disponibilità, per aver accettato di essere nostro ospite, vi lascio l'intervista e vi auguro buona visione. Nice to meet you, thank you for staying here today.
No problem at all. Pleasure to be here.
Why you started to do music and what you started to do with metal music, talk me about the beginning of your career and your story.
Oh, the beginning. Good God, we're going back a long time. I suppose my musical growing up was through the 70s. Yes, that far back with the glam rock era. I mean, my first kind of favorite bands were Slade and T-Rex, all that kind of stuff. And I was drawn. I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, but I must admit, I was drawn to these bands or these acts, who had guitars. I was fascinated by that as a kid, and then I think it was when was it? Was it been 1972 that Alice Cooper came along with Schools Out? I know it was very early, and I was, and again, I've said this so many times, and it does sound like like a bit of a cliche, but I was kind of on a little bit of a journey, I suppose, even at that young age, looking for the next thing, what was the next thing that was heavier than that or heavier than that. I mean, I loved Slade. I absolutely adored Slade as a band, and T-Rex as well, Mark Bolan. And then, like I say, Alice Cooper. And then I remember with my own allowance money, the first piece of vinyl that I ever bought was a 7-inch single, and it was Seven Seas of Rhye by Queen. And I suppose that was the early beginnings of getting into something which you could, I suppose, determine as heavy rock, when Queen were going through that phase. And then it was, Brighton Rock, Ogre Battle, March of the White Queen, all that kind. I loved all that kind of stuff, all the early Queen stuff. I went on to become a Queen fan. I mean, I loved everything that they did, to be perfectly honest. They were such a diverse band. And I like to see that in a band as well. I suppose it's why I love Priest so much, because you go to see Priest, and in one instance they'll tear your face off with Exciter or Painkiller, and then the next instance, the very next song, perhaps you're singing along with Living After Midnight, something like that. So there's that diversity there. And the same with Kiss. When I discovered Kiss, and the story of discovering Kiss, I suppose, is quite well documented now. I was actually in Newcastle city centre, and I was in the city centre with my mother. And we used to just pick one day a week, and we used to go into the city centre, and we'd have a coffee, and like a typical northeast sort of family would have a coffee or a cup of tea and a cake or something like that. Have a walk around the shops, and there was this huge department store called the Cooperative, huge grand old building which is still there in Newcastle to this day. And this store was over, I think it was 3 floors. And it was one of those stores that if that store didn't sell a particular item, then that item just didn't exist. They sold everything, from grocery items to clothes to furniture. And they had a small vinyl section as well. Now, in the Cooperative, way back then, my mother was part of this loyalty scheme that they had. So when you spent so much money in the store, you gained these little stamps and things like that. And then you could redeem them against something else. So anyway, she had wandered off to do this, to go and get this little book of stamps redeemed for whatever, for vouchers or something. And she left me in the vinyl section. And I was just flicking through all the vinyls. And I mean, it wasn't a very well organized vinyl section. I don't think there was anything in alphabetical order. But I was just having a look through this vinyl section. And I saw this album with these 4 creatures on the front. And I was absolutely mesmerized. I just looked at it. I was like, I took it out. It was gatefold. It was a live album. I was like, wow. So hand in the pocket, looking through the allowance money, but I didn't have enough to buy this album. I was like, oh, no. So I put it back in. But as I put it back in, behind it, there was another album, exactly the same band. The band was Kiss, and the album that I bought was Hotter Than Hell, and that was it. Instant Kiss fan from there. I've still got that very same album today. It's here in my studio. And then after that, it was, hooking up with the first couple of guys that I sort of jammed guitar with and stuff. One of them in particular who actually became a member of the first inception of Venom, basically, a guy called Dave Rutherford. And we met at a taekwondo school. And we met there as a result of both being at Newcastle City Hall to see a taekwondo demonstration by the instructor who was opening the club. The demonstration was I think it was on a Friday or a Saturday evening. And then Monday evening was the enrollment for the club. So I had went along with my cousin to see this taekwondo demonstration because, 1973, I discovered Bruce Lee, and that was it. That was another milestone for me. So I enrolled in this taekwondo club, and it was at a time in England where the martial arts were hugely popular. Bruce Lee was just everywhere in the newspapers. It was everywhere. It was all over the place. So it was a very popular and formative time for the martial arts. And previous to that, I had been to the school judo club and all this kind of stuff. So I had a little bit of a background. I had done a little bit of Wadaru karate. But taekwondo was always the art that fascinated me because of all the flashy kicks and all this kind of stuff. And so I went along to this club and enrolled. And obviously it was a brand new club, so everybody was getting to know each other. And then over a period of time, I got to know this guy who was, I think he was, I don't know, maybe he's 4 or 5 years older than me. And his name was Dave Rutherford. And we became friends because we had a mutual interest, obviously, in the martial arts, and we had a mutual interest in guitar. So we found out. He had a guitar, I had a guitar. So we decided to get together, and that was that was the beginnings of what was to become Venom. And the second thing that happened at Newcastle City Hall was in 1979, I went to see Judas Priest. And a friend of mine who was, I'm sure he was sort of dabbling and playing bass for us at that point. And it might have even been Dave. But anyway, I went along to the City Hall with this friend. He called me at home, the old-fashioned telephone and all that kind of stuff. And got tickets for Judas Priest. And it was like, oh, great. We used to go and see any band we could. It didn't matter if they were in a pub or a club or wherever, we'd go and see them. First band I ever saw was Blue Oyster Cult, and that was 1978. That was Newcastle City Hall. Anybody who had a guitar in the band, we used to go and see them. It didn't matter what music they were playing. Majority of it was rock or metal. But this particular night was Priest. It was the Killing Machine tour. And I'd heard of Priest. I'd heard a couple of songs, but I wasn't that familiar with them. So I went along, and that was it. As soon as the curtains opened on that stage, and this blonde guitarist, as I'm looking at the stage left, this blonde guitarist ran on, leathers, blonde hair, flying V. I just looked and went, I want to do that. And that was it. Life changed. Direction set, and it was KK down, and that was it. That was my moment. And luckily enough, since actually getting to speak to KK, I told him all this. I did the whole fanboy thing. It was like, what? I'm lucky enough. We can drop each other a text now and stuff like that. I've still never met the guy in person, but we've spoke on the phone. We've messaged each other. And when I spoke to him the first time, I told him all this. And then he told me his moment was Jimi Hendrix. When he seen Hendrix, it was like, wow, And I suppose Hendrix had a moment. It'll go all the way back to somebody saying Robert Johnson. And that would have been their moment, So everybody has that one moment. It can be a sports personality. It can be a musician. It can be an artist. It can be anything. But it's something which just I don't know, it gives you your purpose. What the Japanese, I suppose, would call ikigai. It gives you your reason, you know, and that, when I seen KK, that was it. I mean, yes, we were messing about, being, you know, trying to be in a band and trying to write songs and stuff like that. But that moment in '79, that was it. You know, it was just like, yes, you know, that was the thing that convinced me this is it. You know, and even after that, you know, I mean, we were lucky in Newcastle that we had Newcastle City Hall and we had Newcastle Mayfair Rock Club, both at that point in the '70s and sort of through to the mid '80s or even the late '80s. Both very, very prestigious venues, which every band used to play. Every band would play the Mayfair and Newcastle City Hall, and they became my second home. You know, if there was a band there, I've seen me go to the Mayfair on a Friday evening, and then the City Hall on a Saturday, and then the next week maybe it's the other way around. But there was always something happening in Newcastle on the weekend, or even sometimes midweek. You know, the shows were always happening there. It was a stop-off point for every single band, and that just fueled the fire. You know, and it was a Priest concert that actually hooked up with Abaddon and Clive Archer. Me and Clive, the original singer from Venom, we became instant friends through a love of Priest. As soon as I saw him and I met him, you know, he had a pair of brushed denim flared jeans on, and you know, down one leg it was embroidered the Ripper, you know, and I thought, ah, yes, you're a good guy, you know. Um, so that all of that pre-Kronos, that was sort of the formative. There's probably a lot more, but you know, that was the formative era of the band. And I mean, there's a lot. I've done a lot of things where I've shown these areas in Newcastle. I've been putting them back up on Facebook from my Patreon and stuff like that. And it's amazing to look at it, even from my perspective, to see how close in proximity all the places which were relevant in early Venom history were. We had a place called the Handyside Arcade where all the rock and metal kids used to hang out on a Saturday afternoon. Next to that was a music store called Jevons, which was where my mum financed my very first electric guitar. Now, if you look at that on a street level in front of you there, to the right of the Handyside Arcade is the Percy Arms, which was a biker's bar where I had the first meeting with Abaddon and Clive Archer. And then if you go left, that takes you down to where the cooperative is, where I bought Hotter Than Hell. And then just up from the cooperative, there's the Mayfair Rock Club. So everything was in that one, you know, all in walking distance of each other, you know. And when you look back on it and you see how many places crop up in the early history of the band, it fascinates me. You know, I'm a firm believer in fate and destiny and the law of attraction, and I've got no religious beliefs whatsoever. It doesn't matter north or south. I think it's all bollocks. It's all bullshit. There's nobody on a fluffy cloud. There's nobody in a pit of fire down there. Bullshit. People have asked me about that side of it, and the one thing I will say, since my experience in 2018, it's like, it's fuck all, right? It's fuck all. There may be something later, but right at that, boom, lights out, fuck all, right? Forget it. But when it comes to the gods and the demons and the devils and the angels and stuff like that, we're here right now. Man is the god. Man is the devil. Because man is capable of the most benevolent act towards his fellow human being. He's capable of helping someone so much. He's capable of loving so much. He is also capable of being the most despicable piece of shit on this planet. And who's destroying the planet? The human race. When have you ever had to worry about a marauding fucking gang of sheep coming into your house to kick your fucking head in and take your television out? Never, you know. So man is the god and man is the devil. It's as simple as that. You know, we create our own gods and our own demons, and some of them aren't very nice. We've just had seen in England there's just been one convicted for a heinous crime. Absolutely disgusting, and a teenager at that. Unbelievable. I watched the news report. My girlfriend Anita, she was sitting there crying. It was like, I don't understand that aspect of the human psyche. I never will. It's unbelievable. But, that's getting off the topic. But that's sort of my early beginnings, I suppose. My father was a drummer. So there was always music in the house. He was into the big bands and the swing era and stuff like that. I think he was a secret Slade fan as well, because I think he liked a bit of Slade. But his thing was the big bands, the Glenn Miller and all this kind of stuff. And so that stuff was always playing in the house. And as I was writing a particular chapter for the book that I'm writing at the moment, I was analysing the songs, and the song Angel Dust, it's got a real swing element to it, because you've got the riff down, that's the horn section out of Glenn Miller, So I think subconsciously a lot of that stuff went into my head, and it was only when you got us three buffoons into a rehearsal space and we tried to play together that it turned into what it did, And I mean, I've said this before, Welcome to Hell and black metal is primarily all my writing, but particularly Welcome to Hell, that was my first attempt at writing songs. I hadn't written anything before that. Nothing. First song I ever wrote was Red Light Fever. And there's this, BMG did the box set with the Church Hall recordings, and that's with Clive Archer singing. So, there's Buried Alive, Raise the Dead, Red Light Fever, and Angel Dust are on there, and that is sort of late 1979. But no, I mean, everything on that album was my first attempt. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. None of us did, we hadn't a fucking clue. We got into the studio and just looked at the amp and went, well, it goes to 10. There you go, let's turn it up to 10. Put a fucking fuzz pedal on top of it, and that's it. There you go. So, I mean, at one point, we didn't even know what tuning we were in. Honestly, we had no fucking clue. We didn't even own a tuner, It was only when we actually got a tuner that we discovered we were in C-sharp standard. And it was like, what the fuck's that? It was like, I don't know. There's a C with a dot beside it. What does that mean? I don't know. Just tune the rest of it like that. So and that became the Venom tuning, But people ask me, how did you come up with that sound? I have no fucking idea. None of us do. I mean, anybody in the band of the originals, anybody who says, oh yeah, well, we did this, fuck off. Bullshit. We had no clue what was going on. We just knew to get in there and play as loud and as aggressive as we possibly could. And fuck everything else. Do you want to do that again? No, that was good. That was our attitude. The engineer would go, could you just repeat that? Fuck off, next song. That was it. And that was the attitude. That's the way it happened, and that's the truth. As simple as that. And we got downtime in the studio as well. It wasn't as if it was paid for time. We got downtime in the studio, and Welcome to Hell is recorded on second-hand 24-track tape. It isn't even a brand new tape. That's why you can hear a little piece of violin music before one of the songs kicks in, and Kronos saying some silly words over the top of it. But it all went to create this, I don't know, just to create the magic of what that album was. I mean, it'll never be recreated, because that album was a moment in time. It was just captured there and then. We had 3 days to do that album. And, people have said, well, you must have had, it was no fucking plan. I think the stars aligned and the universe went, right, we need the next big thing in heavy metal music. There's 3 idiots down there in Newcastle. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's them, and that's it. Right place, right time. Simple as that. We were very lucky. I will say that. We were very, very lucky. And even when it came to black metal, a band who's had a certain degree of success with their first album, whether it's commercial success in volume of sales, or being innovators, which I suppose that's what people said we were, it was such a radically different thing. Any band who's had that for the first album, I would imagine, would feel the pressure for doing the second album. And again, in the book, I've got this chapter called The Dreaded Second Album. And we never even thought about that. Business as usual, right? What you got, and that was it. I wrote black metal sitting on the toilet taking a dump, and that's the truth. I've said that a million times. People saying, such an iconic song, such an iconic riff. Wow, how did you come up with that? It was like, well, you may take a cup of coffee into the toilet and a newspaper. One day I took my guitar, and that was it. And that's the truth. Everything was spontaneous. Nothing was contrived. And I think the important thing was that we were just being true to ourselves. We were being us. We weren't trying to be anybody else. If we tried to be anybody else, we would have failed miserably. I mean, I talked about the Ripper before. We did at rehearsal once. We used to rehearse in this, like say, this church hall in Westgate Road in Newcastle. And we did try one day to play the Ripper. I mean, we used to play Green Man Alishi, No Class, and God of Thunder. We used to play those three songs. And we tried to do the Ripper one day, and we couldn't have failed more miserably than if we had tried to play the Ripper on National, failed to play the Ripper Day. I mean, it was unbelievably bad. So, and I don't even think if you had given any of the Venom songs at that particular point in time, going back to then, if you had given any of those Venom songs, like, I don't know, Witching Hour, Live Like an Angel, given them to better musicians and said, it wouldn't have been the same. Can you imagine Steve Vai back then playing Live Like an Angel or something? It would have been too clean and too nice, and I don't know. I think it would have been too polished. Whereas there was no polish on us whatsoever, not at all.
Let's talk about black metal and Welcome to Hell. They're considered important for the born of Norwegian black metal. What do you think about this and about the evolution of black metal thanks at Venom?
Right. Now, I basically had no idea about any of the bands that followed us. I've never followed the scene. I've got to be totally honest and put my hands up. It just wasn't me. Because I had my influences, which I've already spoke about, which are Priest, Kiss, and Motorhead as well. But I've said this countless times. You could play me a number of black metal bands now that, people would recognize or whatever. I wouldn't have a clue. If you played me a Bathory song right now, I would have no idea what it is. And I have to be brutally honest about that. And I think one of the reasons is as well that I didn't want any other outside influences other than what I was already influenced from in my past. I didn't want anything creeping into my subconscious to give me ideas. Let's put it that way. We, dare I say it, we were the first, we were the innovators, and people took our ideas just as much as we took Priest and Motorhead and, a little bit of Black Sabbath and stuff like that. We always said if you take these bands and pour them into put them into a bowl and mix it all up, tip it all out, then that's going to be Venom. And that's what we were after. But the bands that sort of precede, the bands that came after us, I never followed up on any of that. I didn't explore any of it. I mean, I've got to admit, I think a lot of it at one point it all sounded the same to me. That might sound like me speaking as an old guy going, oh, I can't tell the difference between that and that and that and that. But that's what it was to me because, like I say, I come from Priest. I come from Kiss. I come from Motorhead. You can play me any one of those songs and I'll recognize it and I'll tell you what it is. There's two black metal bands that they're probably later black metal bands, but there's two black metal bands that I do think are, for me personally, right? This is not anybody else's opinion. For me personally, two black metal bands which are at the top of the tree. And even then, I suppose maybe some underground black metal fans will go, "Oh no, that's too commercial." But that, for me, that's Dimmu Borgir and Behemoth. You know, those two bands. I think that now epitomizes what black metal is, what it's become. The one thing that I am proud of is that the term black metal is still around today. You know, 40 years later, that's a hell of an achievement. And you know, a lot of people say like, "Oh yeah, but you know, did Venom and was Venom black metal?" Did it? It's like, excuse me. Let's just backpedal here. Let's just put the brakes on. We had a song called Black Metal. We have an album called Black Metal. We said we are black metal. Why did we say that? Because we felt alienated from heavy metal. We didn't feel the same. You've got to remember that the new wave of British heavy metal was going around at that point. We did not feel a part of that. We felt on the outside. So that's why we said, fuck that, we're black metal. Now, here's my point. Without us saying that, those two words, would it have happened? Would all these bands be around now? If they were, would it be called black metal? We don't know. We don't know. And again, I will say, every raging forest fire, and I should know because we've been in the middle, we live in a forest here, and we've been in the thick of it waiting to be evacuated a few years ago. Every raging forest fire starts with one little spark, one little ignition, right? Every door, doesn't matter how many locks it's got on it, starts to open with one key. And every journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And that's what Venom was. We were the spark, we were the first key, and we were the first step. And as soon as that door opened, everybody came through it. And I think that's what Venom did, and that's what Venom achieved. And I have to say, I think I am justifiably very proud of that. And very proud to think that it has evolved into what it is today. And you have to remember that without evolution comes extinction. It has evolved and it is still alive and kicking. And the best thing is pissing people off. And that's good.
Why you quit Venom?
Ooh. This has never been told. I have never revealed the actual true story why I quit. What I will say, it was all surrounding incidents in 1985 at the Lorelei Festival. It had nothing to do with musical differences, finance, any of that music business bullshit. It had nothing to do with that whatsoever. But I have never told why. But the incident was witnessed by myself and two other people. And that was when I went, no, never again. And that's it. Next question.
Let's talk about Venom.Inc. Let's talk about your work with the band and yeah, why you quit the band this year.
There's another story. All I'm going to say on that for the time being is that the public displays of affection do not correlate with what I have seen in private messages of screenshots to other people that I know and stuff like that. And there's a lot to tell on that score, right? But let's put it this way. The very night that I released my first clip of my video for Losing My Faith, right? I was watching the reactions coming in on the phone. And all of a sudden there's a little message at the top, Venom.Inc has removed you as a collaborator. I went, okay, I don't care, right? And then my supposed best friend and brother had unfriended, blocked, everything. Even my girlfriend and her daughter. Everything. I have no access to nothing. Yes, you look surprised. Think how I felt. And the other thing I will say is that the last time that I actually physically spoke to him was March the 26th, I believe it was. The call log on my phone proves that. Since then, even after the second heart attack, there has been no phone calls. The occasional texts, how are you doing? Then there's a lot more to tell, which I will go into at some point. But I look at all this going, to be brutally honest, I am perfectly happy, content, and at peace with my decision. Let's put it that way. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of others who I've spoke to, I should have done it a long time ago.
Let's talk about your project Mantas. You released new material a few days ago. Can you talk about it? And your project for 2025.
Ah, right. This is happier things to talk about. Yeah, I mean, Losing My Faith, actually. That song was written about 18 months ago. And, you know, anybody who knows me knows that, you know, I'm in my studio now. And this is where I spend all my days. In here. If I'm not doing anything else, I'm in here. And I just love writing music. I just love guitar. I absolutely just love guitar. And, you know, the stuff on my hard drive, if people listen to it, they would go, what? Really? Is that you? You know, they would be surprised. And so there was a lot of stuff I was writing, which was just straight, you know, it's more sort of rock metal than anything. It's not out and out metal, you know. There is some stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff. I've been exploring, even exploring 7-string stuff, all the down-tuned stuff as well. But yeah, Losing My Faith, that was written a long time ago. Like I say, about 18 months, and it was a batch of songs, and they're still there. There's about 10 of them, all in various stages of completion. But it was actually during the pandemic when, you know, essentially the music industry just shut down. All the entertainment industry, nobody was going anywhere. So it was one of these days, you know, somebody had mentioned Patreon to me. So I started doing this Patreon thing. And I was writing a guitar instrumental every month. So there's 18 guitar instrumentals sitting there now as well, which are going to be released at some point. And there was one day I was in the studio and I was just doing my usual stuff, just messing about. And I took a bit of a break and I was having a coffee and I put my phone on. And I've always been a fan of a band called the Dead Daisies. I love John Corabi's voice and I love Doug Aldrich's playing. And the song Resurrected came on. And I was listening to it and I thought, fucking hell, that really could be about me. You know, because, you know, in 2018, I was clinically dead for 5 minutes and, you know, the chorus, I'm back, resurrected, you know, all that. And I was like, and then I thought to myself, I've never actually explored to see if I can sing, you know? So I thought, fuck it, why not? So I learned a verse, bridge, and chorus on guitar, recorded it quickly, and then went into the vocal booth and had a few attempts. And when I was happy with one, I was sort of sitting there thinking, actually, that's not too bad. And I sort of emailed the MP3 to myself, and then I took it up on my phone and I played it to Anita, and I went, what do you think of this? And she went, oh, it's really good. Who's that? And I went, it's me. She went, fuck off. That's you singing. I went, yeah. And then I sent it to a really good friend of mine who's my studio mentor, a guy called Kalle in Germany, who's an absolute studio recording genius. And I sent it to him and I said, be brutally honest. Well, he's German, so he's going to be brutally honest. You know, he's one of those guys. He'll go, that's shit. You know, so I thought if that comes back, then it goes in the delete bin. Nobody need to know, you know. And he was like, yeah, it's pretty good. So he helped and we worked together. And then I sent it to a couple of singer friends of mine and they were like, fucking hell, why don't you just do it? And I was like, well, I suppose I could give it a go. So then I wrote the song Losing My Faith after Resurrected, after I did the cover. And I mean, I've done a few other covers which are sitting there waiting to be put out. And like I say, there's about 10 songs there, all sitting waiting to be completed. And at the minute, I'm putting together Losing My Faith is going out on 12-inch vinyl as a limited release. So I'm busy putting together all of that. And then there was a friend of mine called me from Germany and just seen the song, brilliant. I'm in, you know. So I was like, okay. So the band personnel are already sitting there waiting. I'm like, right, okay. So honestly, we'll just see what happens with it. You know, it's gonna be a case of that. I mean, one of the things I know for myself is that, you know, since having the second heart attack, um, long tours and stuff like that, it's out. You know, it's just too taxing. It's too stressful as well. You know, um, and I've been lucky with the heart attacks that, you know, well, I'm saying lucky, fucking hell, nobody wants a heart attack, but I have been lucky that both of these things have happened at home, where, you know, I've been able to get medical attention straight away. And one of the thoughts that went through my head, because the second one came out of the blue in the back garden, and I was thinking, you know, if I'm sitting on a fucking plane and I've got a 13-hour flight to Japan, and it's like, you know, so that, you know, all that starts getting into your head, and you start thinking, you know, and I would never do that, you know, to Anita, to my partner. I would never do it to my daughter, my grandkids, and stuff like that. You know, it's not fair on them either. But, you know, I do miss being on stage. I have to admit, you know, aside from all the traveling and all the bullshit that goes with it, I hate that side of it. But being on stage is what a musician lives for, I suppose. You know, there's another cliche, but, you know, it is, you know, that interaction with you and the audience. So we'll see what happens. You know, we'll see. But I'm 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 really enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. It's great. You know, I can come in here, please myself, and just get on with it. You know, so but I'm in here working every single day. Yeah, so it's good. It's good. And I've got a few other things which I'm working with people as well. So we'll just take it as it comes. You know, that's all you can do.
If you want to be remembered for an album in your career, an album you are particularly proud, which is and why?
Do you know what it is? I think I'll always go back to Welcome to Hell. You know, because that album holds. I mean, they're probably technically and in terms of songwriting and everything like that, there is probably better albums. I mean, Resurrection was a great album. You know, even the Venom.Inc. albums, you know, Harvey and There's Only Black, they're great albums. But I think I'll always go back to Welcome to Hell, because it was the one that started everything. You know, it was and that could have been our sink or swim moment, really. You know, and even the first single when we did, you know, In League with Satan, Live Like an Angel. Um, to this day, I'm still convinced that the owner of Neat Records, David Woods, we we bugged him so much, you know, like, oh, do a single, do a single, do this, do this, do this, do it. And I'm convinced that, you know, he pressed up, I don't know, maybe 1,000 copies or maybe just a few hundred copies of that first single on a shoestring budget. The cover was on a shoestring, and even the cover of Welcome to Hell is exactly the same as the cover of the single. You know, there was no new artwork or anything like that. Shoestring budget. I'm convinced he did that, waiting for it to just go straight down the toilet so he could turn around to us and go, right, you're shit. I've told you. Now fuck off. Right? But that didn't happen. And obviously, people took to the single. And then we were going in to do another set of demos. And David Woods was a businessman. And, you know, he was a typical music industry businessman as well. And he obviously, you know, he was getting feedback from people, you know, about the single. We weren't getting the feedback. To this day, I've never seen a royalty statement from Neat Records, not one. And we were carrying the equipment in. And I can still remember this. He put his head round the corner from the office door and he went, have you guys got enough songs for an album? And we sort of looked at him and we looked at each other and we were like, yeah. And in reality, we kind of didn't, but we were like, yeah, oh, yeah. He went, okay, then you've got 3 days. Shut the door. And that was it. And we looked at each other. It was like, fuck, we're doing an album. You know, so that was it. I mean, the actual title track, Welcome to Hell, that came together in the studio. I had the riffs and stuff, but the song wasn't kind of finished. Kronos came up with the lyrics for that one. And then the spoken passage in the middle, we were sitting there going, "Oh, it'd be great to have this spoken passage," blah blah, being all clever and artistic and musical. And yeah, we need a female voice. And we thought, well, fucking hell, who we're going to get to do it? So we went through all our girlfriends' names, and I said, no, she can't do it. So we just went downstairs and we grabbed the receptionist, Susan. So she's sitting taking a phone call, and we went, "Oh, you come here." So she came upstairs. We handed her a piece of paper. I said, "Read that," and that was it. That was the passage in the middle of Welcome to Hell. So, an album to be remembered for, I think, there's probably a lot of fans would say other albums. But from my perspective, as the guy who predominantly wrote that album and the founder of the band, I always go back to Welcome to Hell. It's just got something special for me. It holds a special place in my heart. But like I say, I think I can still remember holding my first copy of that album, 20 years old, and the boxes arrived at the studio, and it was like ripping the box, and I pulled this out. Oh my God. And that was us. I turned it over, and there's us on the back of an actual record sleeve. It was like, holy shit. That was it. We were fucking rock stars. It was like, but magical moments, great memories from those days, right away up to black metal. It was when black metal was released, then it started to go south, But up to then, it was us against the fucking world. It really was, and I've got nothing but fond memories from there. Myself and Kronos, we used to be so close as friends, and I met Kronos. Anita, my partner now, she's up at the house. We kind of split up when we were teenagers. We were together, as like 16, 17-year-olds. And then when the band took off, we kind of split up, So at like 19, 18, 19, we sort of went our separate ways. And then 32 years later, we got back in touch with each other. And we've been together ever since for the last 15 years. But it was at Anita's friend's house, her best friend. Anita introduced me to Conrad, to Kronos. We used to go around to her best friend's house. It was something like a Tuesday evening or something that our parents would go out down to the local bar and, sit and play bingo or whatever they did. So all the sort of little metal kids would go to that house, crank the tunes and drink beer and eat pizza, And this particular night that I walked in, her best friend, who was called Michelle said, "Oh, this is my new boyfriend," and pointed to this guy sitting on the sofa. It's Kronos. And that was it. We just started talking. I was looking for a new rhythm guitarist at the time because Dave Rutherford had left. And he said he played guitar. And it was like, okay, come along to rehearsal and see what you got. So he did that. And then he took over bass because the bass player left. And then it was when I wrote Live Like an Angel, Die Like a Devil. I asked Kronos to sing that song, because the idea was that Clive Archer was going to go off stage and do this costume change and come back on for the track Schizo. Right? We had all these grand ideas. And so Conrad used to sing Live Like an Angel at rehearsals, and then he sang it on the first demo tape that we did of it. And then Clive Archer left. So it was like, we don't need another singer because you're already singing. It was just, everything was just by default. He left, you do it. He left, okay, you do it. And that was it. And even our manager, Eric Cook, he was a friend of Abaddon's. And as much as we were learning to play our instruments, he was learning to be a manager. And the only reason he became the manager was because he was the only one of us and our friends who looked smart in a suit. So it was like, well, you look like a businessman, so you can be the manager. And that was it. Everything was DIY. Everything was homemade. Even Hammersmith Odeon 1984, that was all homemade. I can remember painting those ramps with a 666 on in someone's garden when the truck came and we loaded the ramps into the truck, and the paint was still wet, and that dried on the way down from Newcastle to London to play Hammersmith Odeon. So everything was, it was all a shoestring budget. But it's all sort of connected to that Welcome to Hell black metal time, which was just a magical time for it. It really was. And that's what makes me sad about today, that it's never been celebrated. So, but we'll see. We'll see.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for staying here today. Good luck for your project. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Bye. Cheers.